Okay, graphing a line using intercepts. We've talked about the y-intercept. There's actually two intercepts. There's an x as well. So we're going to learn about that today and how to do that. Okay? So we have the x-intercept to introduce now. This is where the line crosses the x-axis when y equals 0. It's the opposite of the y-intercept. So the x-intercept is where the line crosses the x-axis when y equals 0. Okay, so the y was where it crosses the y when x equals 0. And this is the x where it crosses the x where y equals 0. So think opposite, right? The y-intercept is x equals 0. The x-intercept is y equals 0. The opposites. So here's an example. State the x and y-intercepts for this equation. Y equals 1.5x minus 9. We're going to find the x-intercept and the y-intercept. So first, we have the y-intercept, don't we? It's the b, the negative 9. To get the x-intercept, remember, that is when y equals 0. So what do you think I should do with this 0 right here in this equation? Do you see a y anywhere? So could I take that 0 and put it there? Good, let's try it. So to find the x-intercept, make y 0. So there we go. I put in the 0 where the y was. Now, do we know how to solve these equations for x? Yeah, that's what we did all of chapter 2, right? So what should we do first to solve for x? What?
Add 9
Good.
to both sides.
Add 9 to both sides. Good plan. So now I have 9 equals 1.5x, right? Now how do I solve for x? Divide. You guys are so smart. So divide both sides and I get x equals 6. The x equals 6 is now my x-intercept. So the y is negative 9, the x is 6. And this is how you graph them. It's going to ask you to graph them today. So this is the graph. You can sketch it, alright? You don't have to draw yours as big as mine. But here is the graph. So I start with either one, it doesn't matter. I have negative 9 and 6. I know that the negative 9 is on the y. And I know that the 6 is on the x. And I just put 2 dots, connect the lines, and I can write the points as well. So that you can see the zeros in there. It's kind of important that you know that those are zeros. Any questions so far? Pretty simple, right? Just put 0 for y, find x, graph it. Raise your hand if you think this is pretty easy. Good. So in your book, you're going to try 2 of them. I'm not going to have you put them in your notes because there's already a graph in your book. So if you turn to page 210, you're going to do A and B, which are at the very bottom of the book, at the bottom of page 210. You'll see it'll say do these problems. So you have to give me the x and y intercept, and you have to graph it. So 210, A and B. let's see how you guys did. On A, we have this negative 1/3 x plus 5. So I rewrote it here for you. And all I have to do is make the y 0. I can add the 1/3 x over to the left, so that way I get rid of the negative. And remember, these fractions we just cross multiply. So we should get x equals 15. The y is 5. So I graphed it right here. I put a dot at 5. Your graph is a little bit different because it looks like it's counting by 4s, right? And then I went out to 15 and put another dot, so it should look something like that going down, right? B, same thing, put the 0 in, add the 3/2. Remember, we do the keep, flip, change thing. So this is multiply by 2, divide by 3, so we just get 2. So the y equals 3, the x equals 2, and you should have a graph like this one going down. A little bit steeper, right? Any questions on those, A and B? Raise your hand if you got the 5/15.
X equal -2.
Nope, positive because we moved this over. Add it over. Raise your hand if you got the 3/2. Good. Raise your hand if you got both of them. Awesome. Were you able to graph them with those 2 points a lot easier? A little easier than counting squares? Question?
Can you go over how you turn the fraction?
Sure. On this one?
Yeah.
Okay, so remember whenever we have this divide by a fraction, we multiply by the reciprocal, right? So that's 2 over 3. The 3's are going to go away, right?
Oh.
Or you could do 3 times 2 is 6, divided by 3 is still 2. Good question. But the graphing's a lot easier, right? So if we can get 2 points and we can plot them correctly, then we can graph our line, like no problem. We don't have to count squares or do anything like that. Just plotting and graphing. Okay, let's move on to the next section. So we have this equation, which I wrote up on the board. You guys maybe have looked at it since you've been in here. And it's called the standard form, and it looks like that. We have the slope-intercept form, and now we have a standard form. So on your homework, you actually had equations in the standard form. You just didn't know it was called that yet. And to solve, you guys were having to move them around to make it the slope-intercept form, right? Or I did it for you, I guess. But there is a way to solve using this standard form. There's a way to graph and solve. Pretty simple. So it's ax plus by equals c, and a, b, and c are just some numbers. A has to be greater than or equal to 0 for this to work. It can't be negative. Okay. So there's our new equation. We're adding, we have this toolkit of equations. We have 2 important equations. Well, the first one is the slope equation. That's pretty important. And then we have 2 more. All right. So this is what we do. It's pretty simple. You're going to like it because it's got a magic trick in it. I know you like magic tricks in math, right? So find the x-intercept and y-intercept, then graph the line. That's what we're going to do. We did that on the last example. We're going to do this again in a different way. Okay, so here is my equation. It's in standard form. It's some number x plus some number y equals some number. And I want to find the x-intercept, the y-intercept, and then graph it. Okay, so I'm going to do these 2 things. I'm going to find the x-intercept, that's when y equals 0. I'm going to find the y-intercept when x equals 0. So all I did for the x-intercept is I put 0 where the y was, next to the 15. I use parentheses, otherwise it's going to look like 150, right? And then the y-intercept, I put the x equals 0 next to the 60. Any questions so far what I did? Just plugged in 0 for the x and y. We good? Okay, so from here, do we know this is just going to be 0, 15 minus 0, or 15 times 0? That's just 0, right? And this one's going to be 0 over here, right? 60 times 0. So now, if I just put my finger over this, what would be the next step on this one? How would I solve for x? Divide by? Good. And over here, if I put my finger over that, what would I do to solve for y? Yeah, so there's almost, and we call it in math a cover-up method. So you could put your finger over it. You don't really have to write the 0. Like, say if I want to go back to this one. If I'm going to make 15y 0, all I have to do is put my finger over it instead of writing it and then divide 60 into there. This one, I could put my finger over it. You could put an eraser over it if yours is smaller. I wrote really big. That's all we're doing. So when we divide each side, we should get our numbers. So we get x is 79 and y is 316, and those are our intercepts, okay? So we can just graph these, right? Graph these 2 points. And this is what it looks like. You guys can sketch a little graph in your notebook too. Something like that. Not exact because I don't have a perfect graph here, but close enough, right? So the y is 316, the x is 79. You put your points on there so you can see the zeros. So the magic trick or the shortcut is either you could write these out, you could put the zeros, or you could just put your finger over whichever one you're trying to solve for. Sound good? Okay, so what you guys are going to do next is you're going to try on page 212, 1 through 4. So go to 212. It says state the x and y intercept and then graph. Just exactly what we did. You can write them out with zeros in them. You can put your finger over whatever you're solving for. Whatever's going to be 0, you can cover up. So you're going to do 1 through 4. And then we'll stop there and then we'll move on after that.